My phone here is up to the same speed.
Sorry, I just kept playing it to that point because I thought it was funny. Anyway.
Going on.
Yeah, so the definition of a species, well, the most common definition, there are actually 26 different definitions that we have. I'm not kidding. And it's not my favorite definition, but the definition that is most common is one that a biologist named Ernst Mayr used, and he called it, it's now called the biological species concept. And what Ernst Mayr said was, hey, if you have groups of animals and they won't mate together with each other, they're separate species. So under the Ernst Mayr biological species definition, what happened after the drought on Daphne major made those hybrids a separate species. But if that new one refuses to breed with any others and will only breed with another one like it, you've got a new species. Does that make sense? Reproductive isolation under the Ernst Mayr definition. But like I said, there are a bunch of others. Talk to me later. When the rain comes, then there's not that selective pressure anymore and the beaks are going back to their normal size. Does that make sense? So that's another thing that was seen on this one island from finches that Darwin thought were gross beaks. But moving on. Okay. So evolution is a change in genetic makeup of a population. Have you heard that before, Shiner? Good, good, good. All right, so, and this is in red, which means you gotta know it. Natural selection is not the only way that evolution happens. Or, if you want to be more specific, there's sexual selection. This is kind of, some people say that it's a form of natural selection. Like this should be, if you're making an outline, this would be a subheading of natural selection. Sexual selection is the thing that happens, say, with peacocks or with widow birds. And it's like the female likes the male with the big showy tail. And you may be the fast one and you may be the one who's really good at finding seeds, but it doesn't matter because if you don't have the stylish tail, she's not going to breed with you, right? And they've actually done this experiment before. Alfred Russel Wallace was the dude who proposed this, and it was more than, I think, 50 years before someone got around to doing it. But they actually took widow birds and they went and cut a couple inches off of their tails so they were shorter, and they took other widow birds and they glued the extra, it was like giving them hair extensions, but they were giving them tail extensions. And the ones with the longer tails, even though it made it harder for them to fly, that's what the ladies liked, and they got to breed more. And remember, in evolution, it's all about who has the most babies. The ones that have the shorter tail, you probably guessed they didn't have to have much sex, right? Right? Because that was the way it works. That's what they want. In guppies, they've done this experiment. No, Endler has done this experiment with the guppies. And guppies, the males are really hard up there because the females like bright colors and spots and things like that, but it makes it easier for predators to see them. So Endler did this amazing, it's another, by the way, this is another one of those experiments where I said we have actual experimental evidence, we've seen evolution on a small scale. Endler got permission and he went out and he went to this island where they had waterfalls and little pools and stuff, and he poisoned all the fish in 2 ponds. And then he put guppies in both of them. And in one of them he put bigger fish that eat guppies, and the other one he didn't. And he came back year after year after year comparing them, and it didn't take very long before the pond that didn't have predators. Now that doesn't mean there wasn't a bird predator that came along, trying to eat them too, but there would be fewer predators in the lives. The males got really flashy and bright colored, and the others, they stayed kind of drab. Because getting eaten is bad for your... See, that's another way that you could not pass on your genes to the next generation. But anyway, if there's sexual selection, if one mate chooses the other one's features, that's sexual selection. Most of the time in the animal kingdom, that is a case of the male trying to compete for the female and the female selecting. There are a few animals where it's flipped around the other way. There's some really cool birds called phalaropes. All right, so mutation, would you agree that if you have a mutation, you could get a new allele in the population? Would you agree that if that allele is in the population, you have changed the genetic makeup of the population? That is a form of evolution. Then we have gene flow. We got some slides about that coming up, but that's pretty easy to understand. Anytime you have an outsider comes in and they bring their new genes into the population, that's a change in the genetic makeup of the population. That's evolution. Anytime you have one leave and it takes its genes with it, especially if they're like obscure genes, it's one of the very few that have these genes, and so they're no longer in that population, that A change in the makeup of the population. Does this make sense? All right. And bottleneck and founder's effect are really cool. Let me see. I think I have. Yeah, I do. All right. So we're good. We're good. All right. I basically talked my way through the slides because this is preamble. Bottlenecking. I should have brought my Frisbee. Oh well. Let's just jump with this. Okay, so sexual selection. You need to attract a mate. You can see the male's trying really hard and she's having nothing of it. It's like, you don't have enough sexy eye spots on your tail, you're just a man. All right, the ladies can change the population by choosing who to mate with. This tail does not make him better at flying, you would agree. Does not make him better at avoiding predators, you would agree. But because she likes it, it causes a change. A change in the genetic makeup of the population is evolution, right? So sexual selection is one method of doing this. Mutations, I already said, if you get a new mutation in the population, now it could be good, it could be bad, you don't have any control. But if you get a new mutation in the population, you're getting new alleles in the population, that is a form of evolution. And then, of course, natural selection can act on them. And if they're good mutations, you keep them around. If they're bad, they'll probably cause you to not have kids, and they'll be taken out of the population. Are we good? Does that make sense? All right. Gene flow, genes moving between populations. This is a really neat example because we would expect birds to be able to fly across a small distance like a river. But suppose it was a much longer distance. Here we have geese on this side, and you would agree there's a lot of variation. You have, for this allele, for this gene, you have some that are homozygous dominant, some that have two different alleles, it's heterozygous. And then you have the homozygous recessive. Well, guess what? There were no homozygous. We've seen it. These are happy-faced spiders. I know it's a horrible name. But they're called happy-faced spiders. They live in Hawaii. And you've noticed every now and then Hawaii gets slammed by hurricanes, right? It tends to happen if you have little islands out in the South Pacific. And when that happens, lots of the spiders die. And so even if you start with all spiders kind of the same, different islands, different ones survive, and you'll end up with totally different looking populations of spiders. You could lose on different islands. You could lose entire alleles from one island just from dumb luck. Which ones happen to be closer to the waves when they came in? Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So, and this can cause less genetic diversity in a population. Genetic drift, you would agree, because you can kill off some alleles entirely, can cause less diversity, right? And that's easier to do if you have a small population, right? If you have a big population, it's hard to kill every one that has the recessive allele. If you have a small population, that's really easy. All right, so the smaller the population, the bigger the changes that will occur in it, because killing off one or two organisms could totally take a gene out of the gene pool. Does that make sense? All right. So genetic drift could allow you to lose, oh, did I go in the wrong direction? No, I didn't, we're fine. Okay, lose entire alleles, you get less genetic diversity in the population. I already said it's more of a big deal in small populations. All right, so the bottleneck, you have a whole population of marbles. I actually do this. I put glass beads in a water bottle, and I have people pour it out in Frisbee and do it over and over again, and you never get exactly the same. Every time you do it, you're going to come up with a slightly different. It might be like in this case where they show them coming out all blue, they might be all white. They might be white and blue, but none of the yellows. Every time you do, you'll get something different. So the surviving population has a different genetic makeup than this one. Does that make sense? Anyway, and because that happens, a very big population that dies off very, very quickly, you have a little population that's left. This is what causes a bottleneck. The survivors are going to have different alleles than the big population. And if it stays small, then you can have further drift. Small populations also are very prone to inbreeding, which would cause you to look like the British royalty with the big ears and the buck teeth and the hemophilia. This is called a king cheetah. Unfortunately, so many people wanted cheetah skin this and cheetah skin that they killed huge numbers of cheetahs. There were very few cheetahs left, and we bred them back in captivity. We released cheetahs into the wild. We let them grow up, but the problem is they are so inbred. They have the amount of genetic diversity of a white lab rat. I'm not making that up. They are really inbred. And so when that happens, you tend to develop weird mutations when you got a lot of inbreeding. Or to word that more accurately, you tend to take mutations that normally were hidden, and because you're inbreeding, you're more likely to get 2 copies of it, and then that'll come out. So we now have cheetahs that have stripes instead of spots in Africa. They're called king cheetahs because we inbred. Yeah, but they're not as good at sneaking up on things. And it makes it harder for and people are worried that if that becomes too common in the cheetah population, the cheetahs might starve to death. But I'll be honest, my personal opinion is it's more likely that the coming plague will wipe them out because they're so inbred that something that's the cheetah version of the common cold will kill them all. Anyway, and this, by the way, is a very big deal. When you hear people talking about we're going to have this effort to bring back this species. If you get to a small enough number, you might spend a lot of money trying to bring it back, and you come back with something that's really inbred and really fragile and really likely to die on its own anyway. And then was that a good way to spend your money or not? You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of a big deal. All right, this is cool. I love this slide. I love this slide a lot. Mostly because there are only 2 endangered species I've been bitten by, and that's one of them. This is an ordinary Canadian goose. This is a Hawaiian version of that called a nene. All right? That's what they call them. And I want you to notice it's not just the colors that have changed. And the colors have changed a fair bit. You would agree these are kind of brownish gray on the body and a white chest and a very black head. Yeah, right? With serious black and white contrast on the cheeks. That's okay. But they live in places where there's lots of cover and hide real easy in the grass and stuff. Nene lives, you probably could guess from where you see this, on volcanic rock. Not a lot of vegetation. A lot of there's vegetation. A lot of places it's bare rock. Kind of a blackish, brownish rock. So natural selection, they end up looking more brown than the Canadian goose does. Does that make sense? Okay. I mean, these are closely related species. But here, let's look at the really cool thing. See this foot? Well, here's the toe, and here's the toe, and what's going on between the toes?
A lot of webbing.
A lot of webbing. Because these guys do a lot of swimming. Suppose you're bird size, you're goose size. Do you want to swim with the tiger sharks off the coast of Hawaii? No, that's for tourists. That's not for birds. Birds are smarter than we are. All right, so what happens? You spend most of your time climbing around on the rocks. Do you need webbed feet on the rocks?
No, would that make it more difficult?
It would make it more difficult because it would poke your skin and not good. So what happens? The webs are getting smaller, the toes are getting longer, and the claws on the toes are getting longer on the nene. And they bite. Here we have 2 closely related species, and what happened is we call this the founder's effect. It's a type of genetic drift. Suppose the geese are migrating like geese migrate, and a big storm comes along that blows some little birds to the island, medium-sized birds to the island. And when you get there, you live in totally different conditions. And it's too far for you to get back to the mainland without a storm that blows in the other direction. So you're kind of stuck there, and you're just going to try to survive. You're going to face different selective forces on the island, and you're going to end up looking a little bit different. The frequencies in your population are going to end up a little different due to natural selection than the ones on the mainland. Eventually, you'll become different enough that somebody comes along and says, they are different species. Did I mention they bite?
A few times.
Okay. All right. So evolution, it explains a lot of stuff. How new species are formed. We kind of went through that one already. Why different organisms have the same traits. There are 2 different reasons why, homology and convergence. We'll talk about both of them. We're going to do convergence a lot in lab today. And why structures still exist when their function is reduced or eliminated. We call those vestigial structures. Hey, that's in red. What's that mean?
Gotta know it.
Yeah, gotta know it. That's why we have such a large number of species, because one species can change into another, you know? Now, there are 2 different ways that you can do this. You could do sympatric speciation. The Latin name literally means same place. That's a lot less common, but you already heard an example of that with the finches on the Daphne major, right? Or you could do allopatric. This is a lot more common. This is what you just saw with, oh, wrong direction. This is what you just saw with the ornery goose, right? Different location, not breeding with each other, new mutations building up. They change. Allopatric, they're in different places, other place. Good? You'll have to know the words sympatric and allopatric for the test. All right, populations become geographically separated, and over time the separated populations accumulate genetic changes until they're unable or unwilling to reproduce with each other. The unwilling is important. I'm not going to make you guys memorize a whole list of ways that you could separate populations. They call them the pre-zygotic barriers. Those are the ones before you have a baby, and the post-zygotic, the ones after you have a baby. I'll give you two examples real quick. A lot of people say, oh, a horse and a donkey, when they breed together, that's the mule is sterile. That's only mostly true. It's not entirely true. But that would be an example of post-zygotic, because you made the zygote. You made the baby, it grew up to be the embryo, it grew up to be the baby, it grew up to be the mule. But if it's a he, it's going to be sterile, most likely. Does that make sense? And so that's a barrier to reproduction between the horse and the donkey kind, and then there you go. That's post-zygotic. The pre-zygotic would be something that stops them from mating with each other in the first place. It could be, there's a fancy scientific word for it, we call it mechanical isolation. That would be, hey, these parts don't fit together anymore. There's also behavioral isolation. This bird has the right song, and oh, that one has the wrong song. I'm not going to breed with it. You could have a baby with it, but oh, it doesn't sound right. I'm not going to breed with it. Does that make sense? Or you could have temporal isolation. Like this population, they feed in the morning, and this one they feed at night, and so they never see each other, and then they're not going to breed with each other. Does that make sense? That make sense? All right. Ew, this is cool. They're kaibob squirrels. Yeah, the one on the left with the really awesome looking ears, his ears are actually only a little bit longer. He has these crazy sticky up ear tufts. That's hair sticking up mostly. But this guy lives on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. This guy lives on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. They don't visit each other very often. Well, let's be honest, ever. Because they'd have to go down and swim across the river and go up there. So they don't. They're reproductively isolated now. And they're starting to change. This is what we would call incipient speciation. We still consider them to be the same species. See, they're both Sciurus aberti, okay? But this one is the subspecies, Kaibobensis is the kaibob squirrel. And this one is the ordinary boring one, aberti. It's like the aberti style of the aberti squirrel. Yeah, right? But that's what's happening. This is incipient speciation. This is speciation happening right now because they're separated from each other. This one's accumulating some really stylish looking mutations, and the other one doesn't have them. All right, so let's now talk. Remember I said we're going to talk about homologous features and analogous features. We're talking about convergence and all that. Here we have a good example. And this, of all the examples we have in this whole class, this would be the one I love the most, because remember, that's what I used to study. Well, bottlenose dolphins, not bowhead whales, but you get the idea. I study dolphin rests, so this is totally my thing. Okay, totally my thing. If you look at a human arm, and a whale flipper, and a bat arm with a wing, you're going to see that you have one big bone, two bones, a collection of little bones at the joint, and then you have longer bones down there in the digits. You have the same thing. One bone, two bones, a collection of little bones with much better names than these ones because people who do human anatomy are annoying. A collection of little bones right here, and then longer bones for the digits, right? Hey, check it out. One bone, two bones, although this one is reduced so much it's like a thin little toothpick type bone, but two bones, and the collection of little bones, and the bones that make the digits. You have the same pattern in all of these, and that's why scientists look at that and they say, huh, that probably is because their ancestor, they all had the same ancestor, and it had one bone, two bones, collection of little bones at the joint, and some long bones for the digits. Does that make sense? I'm not saying do you agree, but do you understand the concept? So, why organisms have those same types of features? There are two ways. You could have them converge on a design when they come together. Everyone laugh. Thank you, that's so good. Then I don't have to play the song in lab and you'll be happy. Convergent evolution is when natural selection causes organisms to have similar adaptations. We're going to talk about this a lot in lab. I'm going to show you some examples, it's pretty cool. But if you have similar lifestyles, it is likely that you'll get similar adaptations. It's not guaranteed because we know about the shrike. We know that just because you have a lifestyle does not mean that you get mutations that give you useful features. But if you do have mutations that are useful, natural selection will totally choose those. Does that make sense? Okay, so if that happens over time, you can get similar adaptations. And we don't call those homologous. Remember the one on the last slide, because we think these came from common ancestors, because these are like all mammals, homologous. If we don't think they came from a common ancestor, then we say the features are analogous. They're similar, but they're due to convergence. They're not due to having a common ancestor. You're going to have to know both terms. I'm not saying you have to buy the concept, but you have to know both terms. Does that make sense? All right. Now I'm going to go through some examples of convergence. Here we have bushes. All right? You remember we talked before about plants that lived in dry conditions and how they would have reduced leaves that might turn into spines, and they would have thick stems that they could store water in, right? Right? Yes. Check this out. We've got a cactus. Are you surprised that a cactus looks like a cactus? No. Okay, sure, Anthony. But look here. Here we have something that looks an awful lot like a cactus. But if you look at its DNA, it's so not a cactus. This is a milkweed. The leafy things that monarch butterflies like to eat. It just happens to live in dry conditions and have thick, fleshy stores of water in its stems. They're corrugated so they can swell when water comes and cover with spines so things don't eat it. But it's a milkweed. This is a euphorbia, a spurge. Again, it has, I'll do my photosynthesis with the stem. My leaves are reduced to spines. Bugger off, leave me alone. 3 different plants, not closely related at all. Basically a similar design. Would you agree? Okay. Here we got another one. Yeah, the reason I did that was because the plants are all green and meh. The animals are awesome and easy to tell.
Have you ever had cactus stuff in your...
And then you cook it? It's so good. Anyway, but moving on. All right, so check this out. Would you agree that a shark and a dolphin, we're not saying they're closely related, but you agree they both have a streamlined body shape, they both have a dorsal fin on the back for stability, they both have big, wide fins or pectoral flippers to maneuver with?
Yeah, but one's a fish and one's a mammal.
Exactly, that's my point. This is convergent.
Beat you to it.
That's my whole point. Same basic shape because they have a similar lifestyle. This is the big one, this is the famous one. This type of picture shows up in so many textbooks. Over here we have things that we have in most of the world. We have ocelots, sea cats, you can be happy. All right, we have dog type things, we have wolves, okay? Here we have flying squirrels, here we have anteaters, we have groundhogs, you know, rodent things that dig in dirt. We have all of these. Guess what? In Australia, where they didn't have the placental mammals, the ones with the uterus, they have instead the animals with a pouch, right? Well, guess what? We have a pouch version of a flying squirrel that's called a sugar glider, honey glider, or a phalanger, depends on your name.
Why does
yeah.
everything have a pouch?
What?
Why does everything over there have a pouch?
Very good question. Wait until we get to biogeography, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. The short version is that they are all related to each other and descended from pouch mammals that are old. Okay, and in the new place where they went, which would be Australia, before Australia broke off of Antarctica, when they went there, there was like nothing, and they're like, oh, well, I'll try that lifestyle, I'll try this lifestyle, I'll try this lifestyle. And they got isolated by natural selection into separate populations. One that's really good at jumping from tree to tree until it does that. One that's really good at running really fast and becomes your Tasmanian wolf. It runs down and eats other mammals. You get the idea, right? Some that are really good at digging, we call those wombats. This is the big thing that we see often, again and again, all the textbooks, because you have the placental mammals, they tried all these different lifestyles, we got all these different versions. One's an only dance. Guess what? We got the only dance there too. All these different lifestyles we have the equivalent. And we're going to be talking a bit more about convergence in lab. All right, let's talk about vestigial organs. This is really, really important. Everybody pay attention. If it is reduced in size or function, it is a vestigial organ. If its function is absent or reduced, it is vestigial. I put reduced in red and italics here because I want you to remember it. A lot of people who don't like the E word, who don't want to talk about evolution, who want to pretend it doesn't exist, they say, oh, well, that still has a function. It can't be vestigial. No, if it's not being used for its main original purpose, it's still considered to be vestigial. So, let's go through some examples. Hey, we got lizards! We got lizards. We got lizard porn too. We got lizards. Would you agree that lizards use their legs for a couple things? The number one reason for lizard legs is walking. Okay? But they also could use their legs for holding on to a mate or for stimulating the mate. Would you agree?
Yeah,
Right?
someone sent me a picture of lizards humping on birds.
Well, they're right there.
I know it was the same kind, but
Yeah.
weren't you saying last week that the green lizards are dying because of the brown lizards?
Yes, that's right. These
So why is the green
Anolis
lizard on
carolinus, they're being killed out by the brown ones. I can't remember the name
But why
for
is
it.
the green one on top if it's less down?
These are both green. Those are both green.
That one looks brown. I don't know.
Yeah, if I turn up the lights, you see that it's a darker green. Anyway, but here we go. You understand that lizard legs has several functions, right? Hey, check it out! We got lizards. They're still lizards.
They're still over.
Those legs are not much good for walking. Okay? These are lizards. These are not snakes. You can see that very clearly. These legs are not much good for walking, especially those. Those legs are not good for walking.
That's okay. I've been bitten. Ow, he has teeth. Ow, ow, ow.